Nick Khan, in my very humble opinion, is an embarrassment. An embarrassment to his company, an embarrassment to his employees, and an embarrassment to professional wrestling as a whole. Why am I saying this, you might ask? I'll tell you in just a second. But know this is not because of some beef I have with WWE or their booking or whatever. Has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with Nick Khan's own words this past week on the Bill Simmons podcast. He was asked about a whole host of things, some of which I will get into in this video. However, the main thing he was asked that really rubbed me the wrong way and is the reason that I am very vocal of my criticism of him right now is his answer to the Rita Chatterton question. Now, for those of you who are not aware, Rita Chatterton made allegations against Vince McMahon for taking advantage of her against her will in a limo back in the 1980s. She was a referee for the WWF at the time. And this has been one of the most long-running and honestly, it's the big elephant in the room that for whatever reason WWE fans never talked about. We never talked about as fans, but everyone knew about this allegation that was always out there with Vince McMahon. And you would think that after this has been out there from a PR perspective for WWE, after 40 years of this being out there, they would at least understand how to respond in a neutral way. You could argue that for Nick Khan in this instance, but I don't think you can. He was asked about the Rita Chatterton allegation, and he said the following, and I quote, "I think everyone's just plowing ahead because in all of these businesses, there's never a clean, clear path. There's always some encumbrance, something in the way, some hurdle in the way that you have to get around or get through. So I see that I would play any other item like it." So, an encumbrance, he says. A hindrance, a hurdle, he says. People's lives are not an encumbrance upon you, Nick Khan. The experience that Rita Chatterton felt in that moment might be an encumbrance to you because you view things from a business standpoint. And this is not me saying that Nick Khan is a bad businessman. He's great at his job because his job is to make sure WWE, by hook or by crook, makes as much money as humanly possible. And he has done everything in his power to make sure that that is the reality. You would think, though, part of his job would be a little bit of sensitivity, or maybe just a little bit of media literacy and understanding that sometimes no comment is the best thing to say. But to claim that allegation and Rita Chatterton, who has been fighting for justice for herself for decades now, is an encumbrance to your business. To me, personally, in my humble opinion, it reeks of someone who doesn't view people, as human beings. It views me as someone who has a goal in mind, and that goal is to make sure that whatever happens over the next few months happens as cleanly, as he said, as possible. An encumbrance. I have been very critical of WWE and their releases. I've been very critical of the way that those happened. But never did I think that Nick Khan ever came across, because he never actually publicly did any of this stuff, right? It was always come back. It always came back to him, but it was always Vince who was part of the deal. He was always in on those talks of who's going to get released, when are they going to get released, all that jazz. So I've never had the chance to really think about my real opinion about Nick Khan. And I've seen the interviews he's done. I listened to the Bill Simmons interview. I listened to the interview that he had with Ariel Helwani. And an encumbrance. It just, when I heard that, right? Because I needed to hear him say it, and I heard him say it, and it didn't make it. And even in the context of the conversation, I was just like, an encumbrance, a hurdle. Again, there are a lot of things I could say, and look, there are going to be some people who are just like, well, it is an encumbrance, blah, blah, blah. And if you want to do that in the comment section, go ahead. Have your fun. But for me, this it shows you that at the end of the day, whatever you might think of WWE, whatever you might think of companies in general, people at the top do not care. They don't care about being nice. They don't care about being sensitive. They don't care about being good. At the end of the day, all they care about is their bottom line. And Nick Khan made that abundantly clear in this interview. He also said a few other things in this interview with Bill Simmons, which I recommend you listen to just as a primer on Nick Khan, because they do go into a lot of detail about, his kind of role in all of everything that's happened over the last few years in WWE. He said of Vince McMahon as well. He also talked about Vince McMahon and his return. And it was interesting. He also debunked the rumors about Saudi Arabia buying the company. And it's weird, right? It's weird. I think that what he said about Vince McMahon was along the lines of, Vince was never actually going to leave. He was surprised, basically, that Vince lasted as long as he did. Here's the exact quote. It says, of Vince McMahon coming back, he says, "My thought was that there's only one boss in the company, and that ain't me. I think it was always my point of view, Stephanie's point of view, that he would come back. The way he played it to me was smart in that he flew away. He went away for 5-6 months, which people, meaning the audience, seem to like when somebody does that and then comes back to control the company as the company shareholder. So he always expected Vince to be back, is what he's saying now. Even though everything that he said, everything the company said, was the exact opposite. And that's what companies do. That's what big companies do. They lie. It is in their best interest to lie. It is in their best interest to withhold information. So, is what it is. Because last week, Stephanie McMahon was telling everybody that there were going to be no more changes to the company. A few days later, she resigns from the company. And then we hear the talk of sale talks apparently moving into the new stages. Disney, they're in conversation with Disney. They're in conversation with obviously NBC Universal. Tony Khan is talking about maybe buying the company, which he did in a separate interview. Also, it is kind of funny to me in a way that Nick Khan kept referring to Tony Khan as his son. It doesn't bother me. What really bothered me was the Rita Chatterton thing, as you can clearly tell from the way I sound. But yeah, I don't know. Go listen to the podcast. It'll definitely help you form your opinion of Nick Khan, if you haven't already done so, because I know it did with me. But let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released.